The rain in South Boston didn't wash away sins. It only made the blood run faster down the cobblestones. Randor Russo, a man the feds called the architect of the East Coast underworld, was used to people begging him for their lives, for money, for mercy. He had never been approached by a 6-year-old girl in a soaked yellow raincoat, holding a battered teddy bear. She looked up at him, her eyes wide, unblinking, completely unafraid of the suppressed pistol loosely gripped in his right hand, and asked the one question that would dismantle his entire empire. "Mister, do you know someone who wants a child?" The night was bitterly cold, the kind of New England chill that sank into the marrow and refused to leave. Randor Russo stood in the shadows of an alleyway off Atwell's Avenue in Providence. He had just concluded a meeting at a private social club on Federal Hill, a meeting that ended with 2 men from the remnants of the Patriarcha crime family breathing their last on a vinyl floor. Randor was 34, but his eyes held the weary, cold depth of a man who had lived 100 violent lifetimes. He was the head of the Russo Syndicate, an organization that controlled the docks from Boston down to Rhode Island. He was adjusting the cuffs of his bespoke charcoal suit, the adrenaline of the hit slowly fading into his usual icy detachment, when he heard the splash of a puddle. Randor's instincts flared. His hand snapped to the Sig Sauer P226, holstered at his hip. He pivoted, expecting a retaliation squad, a stray cop, or a rival hitman. Instead, the dim, flickering amber light of a broken street lamp illuminated a tiny figure. She couldn't have been more than 6 years old. She wore a bright yellow raincoat that was entirely too large for her, the hem dragging against the filthy, rain-slicked pavement. Her dark hair was plastered to her pale cheeks, and she was clutching a one-eyed plush bear to her chest like a shield. Randor froze. For a man who could calculate the logistics of a multi-million-dollar smuggling ring in his head, his mind completely blanked. He looked around the alley, scanning the shadows. "Where is your mother?" he barked, his voice a low, gravelly baritone that usually made grown men tremble. The little girl didn't flinch. She took a step closer. The rain fell between them in heavy, relentless sheets. She tilted her head, looking past the blood splattered on the cuff of his white shirt, looking directly into his dark, storm-grey eyes. "Mister," she said, her voice a small, bell-like sound over the drumming rain. "Do you know someone who wants a child?" Randor stared at her. "What?" "My mommy says I have to go away," the girl said, her lip trembling slightly, though she fought valiantly to hide it. "She said I need to find someone with a nice suit and a nice car who can take me far away. You have a nice suit. Are you a dad?" A heavy silence descended over the alley, broken only by the distant wail of a police siren. Randor knelt down, ignoring the grime soaking into the knees of his $1,000 trousers. He realized then that the girl was shivering violently. Her small hands were blue with cold. He noticed something else too, a dark, purpling bruise on her jawline. Rage, sudden and unfamiliar, spiked in his chest. Randor Russo was a killer, a racketeer, an extortionist. But he had a strict code, one instilled in him by his late father, the old Don. Women and children are ghosts. You do not touch them, and you do not see them. "What is your name?" Randor asked, his tone softening a fraction. "Lily," she whispered. "Lily. I am Randor," he said, slowly taking off his heavy cashmere overcoat and draping it over her small shoulders. It swallowed her entirely. "Who did this to your face, Lily?" "The bad men," she said simply. "They are looking for Mommy. Mommy told me to run out the fire escape and find someone to buy me. She said I'm worth a lot of money because I'm quiet." Randor felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. This wasn't a case of a negligent parent. This was a desperate play for survival. He knew the streets of Providence, knew the predators that lurked in them. If Lily had asked the wrong man this question, she would have vanished into the darkest corners of the human trafficking rings he actively waged war against. "I am not going to buy you, Lily," Randor said, standing up and taking her small, freezing hand in his large, scarred one. "But I am going to find your mother. Show me where she is." Lily hesitated, gripping her teddy bear tighter. "She told me not to come back. She said the bad men will shoot her." "I am worse than the bad men," Randor stated, the terrifying truth of the statement lost on the child. "Take me to her." Lily nodded once, turning and leading the most feared mafia boss on the East Coast through a labyrinth of forgotten alleyways and rusted fire escapes toward the decaying heart of the city's abandoned industrial district. The building was a condemned tenement near the edge of the Woonasquatucket River. The stench of rot and dampness permeated the air. Lily led Randor up 3 flights of stairs that groaned under his weight. She stopped in front of apartment 3B, a door whose frame was splintered and hanging off its hinges. "Mummy locked it from the inside," Lily whispered. Randor gently moved the child behind him. He drew his weapon, checking the corners of the dark hallway. He didn't bother knocking. He raised his heavy leather boot and kicked the door right next to the deadbolt. The wood shattered, and the door flew open. "Don't move!" a female voice screamed. Randor stepped into the room, his gun raised, sweeping the area. The apartment was a squalid, single-room box. Huddled in the far corner, behind a barricade of a flipped mattress and a broken dining table, was a woman. She was holding a rusty, shaking kitchen knife. "Lily!" the woman cried out, her eyes widening in horror as she saw her daughter stepping out from behind the towering, imposing man in the suit. "I told you to run. I told you not to come back." "I found a man, Mommy," Lily said, her voice carrying a naive triumph. "He has a nice suit." Randor holstered his weapon, raising his hand slowly. He took a moment to analyze the woman. Her name, he would soon learn, was Lindsay Hayes. She was in her late 20s. Her clothes were torn, her ash-blonde hair matted with sweat and dried blood. She had a severe laceration across her forehead, and her left arm hung at an awkward angle. But it was her eyes that struck him. They were a piercing, vibrant green, filled with the kind of primal, feral terror of a cornered animal willing to fight to the death. "Put the knife down," Randor said, his voice flat, commanding. Lindsay squinted at him in the dim light pushing through the grimy window. Her breath hitched. The knife in her hand began to shake more violently. "I know you," she breathed, all the color draining from her already pale face. You're Randor Russo." Randor's jaw tightened. "If you know who I am, you know the knife is useless. Put it down." Lindsay dropped the knife as if it had burned her. She crumpled to the floor, pulling her knees to her chest, a sob tearing from her throat. Oh God, it's over. Richard sent you. Of course he sent the ghost. Just, please kill me quickly. But let the girl go. She doesn't know anything. I beg you, Russo. Take me. But let Lily go." Randor stepped over the broken door frame, completely ignoring the barricade. Richard Lucchese." "Don't play games with me," Lindsay yelled, hysterics taking over. "I know he hired you to get the ledger back." Randor stopped. The pieces rapidly clicked into place. Richard Lucchese was a rising star in the fractured Patriarcha family, a ruthless, unpredictable street boss who had been making aggressive moves into Randa's territory. For months, Randor's intelligence network had been trying to find the source of Lucchese's sudden influx of capital. Rumors whispered of an offshore laundering operation tied to a Mexican cartel, but they had no proof, no accounts, no names. "You have Lucchese's ledger?" Randor asked, his voice suddenly sharp, dangerous. Lindsay looked up, wiping a mixture of blood and tears from her face. Confusion briefly replaced her terror. You aren't here for the ledger?" "Until 10 seconds ago, I didn't know you existed," Randor said. He looked at Lily, who had walked over to her mother and was patting her uninjured arm gently. Then he looked back at Lindsay. "Tell me exactly what is going on, and I might just let you live." Lindsay took a shuddering breath. The reality of her situation was grim. She was a civilian, a low-level forensic accountant hired by a legitimate-looking import-export firm in Boston. It took her 3 years to realize the firm was a front for Richard Lucchese. When she discovered they were using her credentials to authorize wire transfers to the Cayman Islands, effectively framing her if the FBI ever raided them, she panicked. "I downloaded the master drives onto an encrypted flash drive," Lindsay confessed, her voice shaking. "I thought I could use it as leverage. Tell Richard to let me walk away, or I'd send it to the feds. I was stupid. I didn't realize how these people worked. He sent men to my house last night. They beat me. They hit Lily when she tried to stop them. I managed to blind one with a spray can and we ran. We've been hiding here. I knew they were closing in. I had to get Lily out." Randor processed the information with cold, mechanical precision. Lucchese's ledger was the holy grail. It was the key to completely dismantling his rival's financial infrastructure without firing a single shot in a street war. He looked at Lindsay. She was broken, bleeding, utterly defeated, and yet she had the courage to steal from the mob to protect her child, and the selflessness to try and sell her own daughter into safety rather than let her die. Randor walked over to the mattress and effortlessly tossed it aside. Lindsay cowered, pulling Lily close. Randor reached into his pocket and pulled out a clean, white linen handkerchief. He held it out to her. "Where is the drive?" he asked. Lindsay hesitated, then reached into her bra, pulling out a small metallic USB stick. She held it tightly in her fist. "If I give this to you, what happens to us?" "I take it, and I destroy Richard Lucchese," Randor said simply. "And us?" Lindsay pressed, her green eyes locking onto his. "You know too much, and you have seen my face in the middle of a hit night," Randor replied. Lindsay closed her eyes, preparing for the bullet. "Which means," Randor continued, his voice taking on a strange, unfamiliar softness, "you belong to me now. Get up, you're leaving." "Where are you taking us?" "Somewhere Lucchese's men will never reach you," Randor said, turning his back to her. "If you want your daughter to live to see 7, you will follow me." Randor's estate was a fortress disguised as a Gilded Age mansion on the jagged cliffs of Newport, Rhode Island. Surrounded by wrought iron gates, high stone walls, and patrolled by armed guards who moved like shadows, it was impregnable. Lindsay awoke to the sound of crashing waves. She was lying in a bed softer than anything she had ever felt, enveloped in heavy silk sheets. For a wild, disorienting moment, she thought she had died. Then the dull, throbbing pain in her arm and head reminded her she was still tethered to the waking world. She sat up with a gasp. The room was massive, decorated in muted tones of charcoal and silver. "Lily," she croaked, panic instantly rising. "She is asleep in the adjoining room." Lindsay flinched. Sitting in a leather wingback chair in the corner of the room was Randor. He was no longer wearing the blood-splattered suit. He wore dark slacks and a black Henley that stretched tight across his broad chest, revealing the edges of dark tattoos trailing up his neck. He looked less like a corporate executive and more like the violent mob boss he truly was. "My Dr. Stanton, set your arm." You had a minor concussion and 3 fractured ribs, Randor said, not moving from the chair. He held a crystal glass of amber liquid, swirling it slowly. He gave you something for the pain. You've been asleep for 14 hours. Lindsay touched her head, feeling the thick bandage there. Why? She asked, her voice raspy. Why what? Why save us? You have the drive. You could have killed us in that apartment and taken it. That's what your kind does. Randor's eyes narrowed. He set the glass down on a side table. He stood up, crossing the room with a predatory grace that made Lindsay press herself back against the headboard. He stopped at the edge of the bed, towering over her. Do not presume to know my kind, Lindsay, he said, his voice dangerously low. I am a businessman. The drive is secure. My technicians are already dismantling Lucchese's accounts. But beyond business, I do not execute mothers and children, especially not a mother who was willing to give up her own flesh and blood to save her. Lindsay swallowed hard, intimidated, but refusing to break eye contact. The fear was still there, but beneath it, a spark of defiance flickered. So what are we? Prisoners. Guests, Randor corrected. Until I say otherwise. Lucchese's men are tearing Providence apart looking for you. If you walk out of my gates, you will be dead before you reach the highway. I can't stay here, Lindsay argued, clutching the sheets. I have no money, no clothes. Everything has been provided, Randor interrupted. There are clothes in the wardrobe. Food will be brought to you. Do not leave the east wing of the house without an escort. He turned to leave. Randor. He paused at the door, his hand on the brass knob. It was the first time she had used his first name. It sounded strange coming from her lips, soft, lacking the fear and reverence his subordinates used. Thank you, she whispered. Randor didn't look back. Don't thank me yet. Over the next 2 weeks, a bizarre domestic rhythm settled over the Newport estate. Lindsay healed, her bruises fading from angry purples to dull yellows. She spent her days in the sprawling library or walking the walled gardens, always shadowed by a silent, broad-shouldered guard named Martha Penhaligon, Randor's trusted underboss. But it was the evenings that began to shift the dynamic. Randor was a ghost in his own home. He worked in his study, orchestrating the systematic destruction of the Lucchese faction. Yet, every evening at 7, he emerged to eat dinner in the grand formal dining room. Lindsay and Lily were required to join him. At first, the dinners were suffocatingly silent, but Lily, blissfully unaware of the gravity of their host's profession, refused to abide by the silence. One evening, as rain battered the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, Lily pointed her fork at Randor. Mr. Randor, why do you look so angry all the time? Lindsay nearly choked on her wine. Lily, hush. Randor slowly put down his knife. He looked at the little girl, who was wearing a pristine white dress his staff had bought for her. I am not angry, Lily. I am thinking. You think too hard, Lily declared, taking a bite of her mashed potatoes. It makes your face all wrinkly. Are you going to be our new dad? The silence that followed was deafening. Lindsay felt her face burn with intense heat. She looked down at her plate, mortified. Lily, apologize right now. Mr. Russo is just... He is letting us stay here. Randor looked from the child to the mother. He noticed the blush on Lindsay's cheeks, the way her green eyes darted away nervously. For the first time in perhaps a decade, the corner of Randor's mouth twitched upward into the ghost of a smile. I am not your father, little one, Randor said, his tone remarkably gentle. But I will make sure no one ever hurts you or your mother again. Lindsay looked up, startled by the sincerity in his voice. In that moment, looking at the hardened mafia boss softly indulging a 6-year-old, the terror she felt toward him began to fracture. He was a monster to the world, a man built on violence and extortion, but here, in this fortress, he was a shield. And God help her, she found herself deeply, confusingly drawn to the man behind the shield. Later that night, long after Lily was asleep, Lindsay found herself wandering down the hallway toward the kitchen for a glass of water. As she passed Randor's study, she heard raised voices. The door was slightly ajar. She crept closer, peering through the crack. Randor was standing behind his mahogany desk, leaning heavily on his knuckles. Martha, the underboss, was pacing the Persian rug. "Boss, it's getting out of hand," Martha was saying, his thick Boston accent strained. "We drained Lucchese's offshore accounts. He's bleeding. But instead of folding, he's going scorched earth. He knows someone flipped, and word on the street is he tracked the GPS on the girl's burner phone before she smashed it. He knows the general area she vanished." "He doesn't know she's here," Randor countered coldly. "He's not an idiot, Dom. He puts 2 and 2 together. The accounts get drained exactly when the girl goes missing in your territory. He's rallying the commission. He's claiming you broke the truce by sheltering a thief." Martha stopped pacing, looking directly at his boss. "Give the woman up, Dom. We got the money. We won the war. You hand her over, Lucchese saves face, and we take his territory without a single bullet fired." Lindsay stopped breathing. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She clamped a hand over her mouth. This is it, she thought. This is where the fairy tale ends. She watched Randor. The boss stood perfectly still for a long, agonizing moment. The silence stretched tight enough to snap. Finally, Randor stood up straight. He looked at Martha, his grey eyes flashing with a sudden, terrifying violence that made Lindsay shiver. "Martha," Randor said, his voice a deadly, quiet hiss. "If you ever suggest handing Lindsay and the child over to those animals again, I will personally put a bullet between your eyes." Martha swallowed hard, taking a step back. "Understood, boss. But Lucchese is bringing an army." "Then let him come," Randor said, turning to look out the window into the pitch-black night. "We will bury him in the ocean." Lindsay backed away from the door, sliding down the wall of the corridor until she hit the floor. Tears stung her eyes, but this time they weren't born of fear. She was tethered to a monster, yes, but he was her monster now. And the real war was just beginning. The morning sun over the Atlantic did nothing to warm the chill that had settled in Lindsay's bones. After overhearing Randor's refusal to hand her over to Richard Lucchese, the sprawling Newport estate no longer felt like a prison. It felt like a bunker. Lindsay found Randor not in his study, but in the estate's glass-domed conservatory. He was standing amidst rows of vibrant, blooming orchids, a stark contrast to the violence that clung to him like a second skin. He wore a crisp white shirt, the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing the intricate ink that mapped his forearms. He was methodically pruning a dead stem with a pair of silver shears. "You are up early," Randor said without turning around. His hearing was unnervingly sharp. Lindsay stepped onto the humid flagstone path, wrapping her cashmere shawl tighter around her shoulders. "I didn't sleep much. I heard you talking to Martha last night." The shears paused. Randor slowly turned, his storm-grey eyes locking onto hers. He didn't look angry that she had eavesdropped, merely assessing. "You should not wander the halls at night, Lindsay. It makes my men nervous." "Martha wanted you to give us up," she pressed, her voice trembling slightly. She closed the distance between them, needing him to see the gravity in her expression. Randa, if Lucchese wants me that badly, he's going to tear your world apart to get me. Why are you risking your empire for a woman and a child you met 2 weeks ago?" Randor set the shears down on a wrought iron table. He closed the gap between them, stopping mere inches away. He was so close she could smell the sandalwood of his soap and the faint, ever-present metallic tang of danger. "My empire," Randor said, his voice a low, gravelly hum, "was built on leverage, fear, and absolute control. Lucchese is a rabid dog who thinks he can bark loud enough to make me step aside. He wants you not just because of the ledger, but because taking you from my territory proves he can bleed me." He reached out, and for a heart-stopping second, Lindsay thought he was going to grab her by the throat. Instead, his rough, calloused fingers gently brushed a stray lock of ash-blonde hair behind her ear. The touch was so startlingly tender, it made her breath hitch. "I protect what is in my house, Lindsay," he murmured, his gaze dropping briefly to her lips before meeting her eyes again. "And you, whether you like it or not, are under my protection. I do not bow to rabid dogs." Before Lindsay could process the heavy, suffocating tension thickening the humid air between them, the heavy mahogany doors of the conservatory burst open. Martha strode in, his face pale, a ringing cell phone clutched in his fist. "Boss, we have a massive problem." Randor's demeanor shifted instantly. The gentle protector vanished, replaced entirely by the ruthless head of the Russo syndicate. "Report!" "Pier 42 in South Boston," Martha said, his chest heaving. "Lucchese didn't attack the men. He hit the infrastructure. 2 car bombs took out the warehouse loading bays. 3 of our guys are dead, Randor. 4 in the ICU. He's sending a message." Lindsay gasped, pressing a hand to her mouth. The reality of the mob war she had ignited crashed down on her. People were dying. Randor didn't flinch. His expression hardened into a mask of pure, sculpted ice. "Lock down the estate. Double the perimeter guard. Move Lindsay and Lily to the reinforced wing. No one gets in or out without my explicit authorization." "Where are you going?" Lindsay asked, panic rising in her throat as Randor bypassed her, heading for the doors. He stopped, glancing back over his shoulder. The look in his eyes was something straight out of a nightmare, cold, hollow, and promising absolute devastation. "I am going to remind Richard Lucchese why they call me the Ghost." For the next 3 days, Randor did not return to the estate. Lindsay and Lily were confined to a suite of rooms behind reinforced steel doors. The news channels, which Lindsay watched obsessively, painted a grim picture of the East Coast under siege. Mysterious fires at import warehouses, a Lucchese lieutenant found gunned down in a Providence restaurant, and the FBI scrambling to contain a turf war that was rapidly spiraling out of control. Every night, Lindsay lay awake, listening to the crashing waves, terrified that the next knock on the door would be Martha telling her Randor was dead. She had spent her life running from bad men, and now she found herself desperately praying for the worst of them to come home. It was past 2 in the morning when the heavy reinforced door to Lindsay's suite finally clicked open. Lindsay, who had been dozing fitfully in an armchair with a book in her lap, bolted upright. Randor stood in the doorway. He looked like a man who had walked through hell. His bespoke suit jacket was gone, his white shirt torn and stained with dark, terrifying patches of crimson. He leaned heavily against the doorframe, his breath coming in shallow, ragged rasps. "Randa!" Lindsay abandoned the book, rushing across the room. "Don't wake the child," he grunted, holding up a bloodied hand to stop her as he stumbled past, making his way toward his private study down the hall. Lindsay ignored him. She followed him into the study, watching in horror as he collapsed heavily into the leather chair behind his desk. He reached into his desk drawer, pulling out a first aid kit and a bottle of scotch. With trembling, blood-slicked fingers, he tried to unbutton his shirt. "Stop, let me do it," Lindsay ordered. Randor looked up, his eyes glassy with pain. "Lindsay, leave." "Shut up," she snapped, surprising both of them with the venom in her voice. She stepped around the desk and slapped his hands away. "You saved my life. The least I can do is patch up yours." Randor let his head fall back against the chair, a harsh breath hissing through his teeth as Lindsay expertly ripped the ruined shirt open. A jagged, ugly knife wound traced his left side, just below his ribs. It was deep, still oozing sluggishly, but not fatal. "Who did this?" she asked, her hands shaking slightly as she uncapped the bottle of rubbing alcohol. "Lucase's personal enforcer," Randor breathed out. "He's no longer an issue." Lindsay poured the alcohol onto a gauze pad. "This is going to burn." She pressed it to the wound. Randor didn't scream, but his entire body went rigid, his jaw clenching so hard she thought his teeth might crack. His massive hand shot out, gripping the armrest of the chair tight enough to split the leather. As she worked, cleaning and binding the wound with practiced efficiency, a skill learned from years of patching up her own injuries before going on the run, the silence in the room grew heavy, charged with an undeniable, raw intimacy. "You shouldn't be seeing this," Randor murmured, watching her face intently as she leaned over him, taping the bandages tight. "You shouldn't be involved in this blood." "I brought this blood to your door," Lindsay countered softly, refusing to look away from her task. "It's my fault." "No." Randor reached up, his large, warm hand capturing her chin and forcing her to look at him. The intensity in his grey eyes pinned her in place. "Lucase's greed caused this. Your only crime was trying to survive. I have spent my entire life surrounded by monsters, Lindsay. People who would sell their own mothers for a piece of the docks. Then I saw a little girl in a yellow raincoat, completely fearless, asking a killer to save her mother." His thumb brushed gently across her lower lip. Lindsay stopped breathing. The pain, the violence, the mafia war outside these walls, it all evaporated, leaving only the heat radiating between them. "You and Lily are the only pure things that have ever entered my world," Randor confessed, his voice dropping to a rough whisper. "And I will burn the entire eastern seaboard to ash before I let anyone take you from me." Lindsay's heart pounded a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned into his touch. "Randor." He didn't wait for her to finish. His hand slid to the back of her neck, tangling in her ash-blonde hair, and he pulled her down. The kiss was desperate, bruising, and entirely consuming. It tasted of scotch, copper, and raw, unfiltered need. Lindsay surrendered to it completely, wrapping her arms around his broad shoulders, anchoring herself to the most dangerous man she had ever met. For a fleeting, euphoric moment, she felt entirely safe. Then, the world exploded. A deafening blast shattered the serenity of the night, rattling the bulletproof windows of the study. The floor violently shook, sending books tumbling from the mahogany shelves. Randor broke the kiss instantly, his eyes snapping open, fully alert, the pain in his side forgotten. Before either of them could speak, the estate's blaring security sirens began to wail, a shrill, mechanical scream that cut through the darkness. The power flickered, then died completely, plunging the study into pitch blackness, illuminated only by the strobing red emergency lights. Heavy boots pounded down the hallway outside. The door burst open. It was Martha, carrying an assault rifle, his face illuminated by the red emergency flashes. "Boss!" Martha yelled over the sirens. "The sea gate is breached. Someone deactivated the magnetic locks from the inside guardhouse. Randor stood up, his face contorted in a mask of lethal fury. He grabbed his Sig Sauer from the desk drawer and racked the slide. "Silas!" Randor spat out, naming the night shift captain. "He sold us out to Lucchese." "They're swarming the lower lawns, Dom. They've got heavy weaponry. We're completely surrounded." Randor turned to Lindsay, grabbing her by the shoulders. His grip was bruising. "Get Lily. Go to the panic room beneath the wine cellar. Do not open the door for anyone but me or Martha. Do you understand?" Lindsay was terrified. Her brief moment of safety shattered into a million jagged pieces. "What are you going to do?" "I am going to kill them all," Randor promised, turning toward the hallway, stepping directly into the line of fire. The air in the grand hallway tasted of cordite and pulverized drywall. Lindsay didn't look back as Randor and Martha disappeared into the smoke-filled corridor, the staccato roar of automatic gunfire erupting almost immediately to drown out the blaring security sirens. She sprinted barefoot toward the reinforced wing, her heart hammering wildly against her ribs. She burst into Lily's adjoining bedroom. The 6-year-old was sitting upright in the massive 4-poster bed, her small arms wrapped tightly around the battered, one-eyed teddy bear. Her eyes were wide, reflecting the strobe of the red emergency lights outside the window, but she wasn't crying. "Mommy, are the bad men here?" Lily asked, her voice a tiny, brave whisper. "Yes, baby," Lindsay gasped, scooping the child into her arms. Lily was heavy, but the pure adrenaline coursing through Lindsay's veins made her feel weightless. "But Randor is going to stop them. We just need to go down to the cellar, exactly like he told us." Lindsay hurried out of the suite, navigating the labyrinthine corridors of the East Wing. The estate was a war zone. The sounds of breaking glass and shouting echoed up the grand staircase. She reached the servants' stairs that led down to the kitchens and the subterranean wine cellar. She pushed the heavy oak door open, stepping onto the stone landing, when a cold, metallic click froze her in place. "Going down, Mrs. Hayes?" Lindsay whipped her head around. Stepping out of the shadows of the pantry was Silas. The night shift captain was a hulking man with a freshly shaved head and a tactical vest. He held a suppressed 9mm pistol pointed directly at Lindsay's chest. "Silas," Lindsay breathed, instinctively turning her body to shield Lily from the barrel. "Randor trusted you." "Randor is a dead man walking," Silas sneered, stepping closer, his boots crunching on broken glass. "Lucchese offered me 5 million and a territory in Southie to leave the Seagate unlatched. You think I'm going to pass up retirement for a boss who's gone soft over a stray cat and her kitten? Put the kid down. Lucchese wants you alive." But he didn't say anything about the girl. A primal, suffocating terror gripped Lindsay, but it was instantly swallowed by a blinding, ferocious rage. This man was going to kill her daughter. "Run, Lily," Lindsay whispered fiercely into the child's hair. "When I say go, you run down the stairs and don't stop." "Mommy, go!" Lindsay screamed, violently shoving Lily toward the descending stone steps. Silas cursed, raising his weapon toward the fleeing child. But Lindsay didn't give him the chance. With a feral cry, she launched herself at the mercenary, her fingers curling into claws as she went straight for his eyes. The impact knocked Silas off balance. His gun discharged, the bullet ricocheting harmlessly off the stone ceiling. He grunted, bringing a heavy forearm down across Lindsay's face. The blow sent her crashing to the floor, her vision exploding into white stars. Blood instantly flooded her mouth. Silas stood over her, breathing heavily, wiping a scratch on his cheek. "Stupid bitch! I'll just shoot you in the kneecaps and drag you out." He aimed the pistol at her legs. Lindsay braced for the agony. A shadow detached itself from the gloom at the top of the stairs. There was no footstep, no warning, only the sudden, terrifying materialization of a predator. Randor's hand clamped around Silas's wrist with the force of a hydraulic press. Silas let out a breathless shriek as the bones in his forearm shattered under the grip. Before the mercenary could even process the pain, Randor drove his combat knife upward, burying the 6-inch steel blade to the hilt directly beneath Silas's jawline. Silas's eyes rolled back. Randor violently twisted the blade, then yanked it free, letting the traitor's massive body crumple to the stone floor like a discarded rag doll. Randor stood over the corpse, chest heaving, his pristine white shirt now completely soaked in a horrifying mixture of his own blood and the blood of his enemies. He looked like the devil himself, summoned from the depths of the estate. He immediately dropped to his knees beside Lindsay. "Are you hit?" he demanded, his hands frantically checking her over. "No," Lindsay sobbed, coughing up blood from her split lip. She grabbed his face, her hands smearing crimson across his cheeks. "Lily." She ran down the stairs. "I have her, boss," Martha's voice called out from the darkness below. The underboss emerged from the cellar stairs, carrying a trembling Lily securely in his arms. Randor let out a breath that sounded like a dry heave. He pulled Lindsay off the floor, holding her tightly against his uninjured side. "Martha, get them into the vault. Seal it. If anyone but me knocks, you shoot through the steel." "Where are you going?" Lindsay pleaded, gripping his lapels. "Silas said Lucchese is here. Let the police handle it. We have the ledger." "The police are bought. This ends tonight, Lindsay," Randor said, his voice dropping to that lethal, icy register. He pressed a harsh, desperate kiss to her forehead. "I told you. I protect what is mine." With that, Randor Russo turned, reloading his weapon, and walked back up the stairs into the burning heart of his mansion. The subterranean vault beneath the Newport estate smelled of aged Bordeaux and cold, unforgiving steel. Lindsay sat on the polished concrete floor, her arms wrapped so tightly around Lily that her own muscles cramped and burned. In the oppressive darkness, illuminated only by the faint, sickly green glow of the emergency exit sign above the heavy titanium door, the sounds of war were muted but unmistakable. Every heavy thud that vibrated through the ceiling sent a fresh wave of terror down Lindsay's spine. The staccato rhythm of automatic gunfire was a terrifying drumbeat, punctuated by the occasional, deafening boom of a fragmentation grenade that rattled the racks of vintage wine surrounding them. Martha Penhaligon stood stationed by the door, his massive frame rigid, the barrel of his assault rifle leveled squarely at the steel frame. Sweat beaded on his forehead, catching the green light. He was bleeding from a graze on his cheek, but his eyes never wavered from the entrance. "Is Papa going to die?" The question, whispered in the dark by a 6-year-old child, shattered Lindsay's heart. Papa. Lily had already claimed him. In the span of 2 weeks, the most feared man on the eastern seaboard had become the center of her daughter's universe. "No, sweetie," Lindsay whispered fiercely, pressing a kiss into Lily's dusty, tear-streaked hair. She didn't know if she was lying. "He promised he would protect us." Randor doesn't break his promises. Above them, in the grand foyer of the Gilded Age mansion, the world was ending in a symphony of shattered glass and screaming metal. The estate's entrance was a slaughterhouse. The towering Carrara marble columns that had stood for over a century were chewed into jagged, chalky ruins by heavy caliber crossfire. The multi-million-dollar Chihuly chandelier, a cascading masterpiece of blown glass, lay obliterated across the checkerboard floor, resembling a frozen, colorful explosion. 4 of Randor's loyal men lay dead among the ruins, but they had extracted a horrific toll. A dozen of Lucchese's elite strike team were sprawled across the front steps and the grand staircase, their blood pooling in the grout of the expensive tiling. Richard Lucchese, a sharply dressed man in his late 40s with a permanent, arrogant sneer, stood behind the overturned remains of a heavy oak concierge table. He was breathing heavily, his bespoke Italian suit dusted with plaster and drywall. He had 3 remaining men with him, their tactical rifles trained on the sweeping curves of the grand staircase, anticipating a final, desperate charge. "It's over, Russo!" Lucchese's voice echoed through the ruined hall, hoarse and desperate. "Your perimeter is gone. You've got no men left. Give me the woman and the drive, and I'll let you walk out of here. You can take a boat to Europe and live out your days. Otherwise, I swear to God, we burn this place to the ground, with you and that brat inside it." Silence answered him. Only the crackle of a small, creeping fire, burning in the heavy velvet draperies, broke the stillness, casting dancing, demonic shadows across the bloody walls. "Did you hear me, Randor?" Lucchese yelled, his patience fraying into genuine panic. He knew the police were paid to look the other way for 30 minutes, but time was rapidly running out. "I hear a dead man barking." The whisper didn't come from the top of the stairs. It came from the shadows directly behind them. Randor had not taken the stairs. He had utilized the hidden servant passages built into the very walls of the mansion, passages he had memorized as a child when his father first bought the fortress. He stepped out from a concealed wood-paneled door directly behind Lucchese's right flank, moving with the terrifying, fluid silence that had earned him the moniker of the Ghost. Before the 3 henchmen could even register the shift in the air, Randor moved with lethal, mechanical precision. 2 suppressed shots from his Sig Sauer P226 took out the guards on the left, the bullets finding the unprotected gaps in their tactical armor at the neck. The 3rd guard managed to pivot, raising his weapon, but Randor closed the distance in 2 massive strides, swatting the hot barrel of the rifle aside and driving the butt of his pistol brutally into the man's temple. As the guard crumpled, Randor put a bullet through his chest to ensure he stayed down. Lucchese shrieked, blindly firing his pistol in Randor's direction, but his hand was shaking too violently. Randor sidestepped the wild shot, lashed out with a heavy boot, and kicked the gun out of Lucchese's hand. The impact snapped Lucchese's wrist with a sickening crunch. The rival boss screamed in agony, stumbling backward, his polished loafers slipping on the blood-slicked marble. He hit the ground hard, scrambling frantically like a cornered rat until his back hit the base of a shattered column. Randor stood over him. He looked like the devil incarnate. His pristine white shirt was soaked in a horrifying mixture of his own blood and the blood of the traitors he had butchered. His chest heaved, but his storm-grey eyes were utterly devoid of emotion. He leveled the barrel of the Sig Sauer perfectly between Lucchese's eyes. "You think you've won?" Lucchese spat, clutching his broken wrist to his chest, spit flying from his lips. "You kill me. The Commission will hunt you to the ends of the earth. You broke the rules, Dom. You sheltered a thief. You brought a civilian into our world." "I didn't break the rules, Richard. I rewrote them," Randor said, his voice a low, gravelly hum that resonated with absolute finality. He reached into his pocket with his left hand and tossed a small, black burner phone onto Lucchese's chest. It clattered against his sternum. Lucchese flinched, staring down at the device. "What is this?" he wheezed. "While you were busy storming my gates like a rabid animal," Randor explained coldly, "my technicians finished decrypting the ledger Lindsay brought me, the one you thought she was going to sell to the FBI. I didn't send it to the feds, Richard. The feds would just put you in a comfortable cell." Lucchese's face lost all its color. A new, far more profound terror began to seize his heart. "What did you do?" "I sent the unredacted ledger directly to the plaza bosses of the Sinaloa cartel," Randor stated. The ledger detailing exactly how you have been skimming 30% off the top of their laundering operations through the port of Boston for the past 3 years. I also sent them your offshore UBS routing numbers, which my people have currently emptied. Lucchese began to violently shake. The cartel did not operate with truces, sit-downs, or commission rulings. They operated with chainsaws, acid vats, and generational violence. No, Dom, you couldn't have. They'll kill my whole family. You are penniless, Richard. And by sunrise, there will be a $10 million bounty on your head, courtesy of Culiacan. The commission won't avenge you. They will hand you over, wrapped in a bow to save their own skins. Lucchese looked up at the towering figure of the ghost. The realization of his absolute, total destruction crashed over him. He wasn't just defeated. He was erased from history. So why? Lucchese choked out, tears of pure, undiluted terror welling in his eyes. Why kill me now? If I'm a dead man anyway, why not let them do it? Let me rot. Randor's jaw tightened. The memory of Lindsay's bruised, desperate face and Lily's terrified shivering in that Providence alleyway flashed vividly in his mind. He remembered the heavy, suffocating fear that had gripped his own heart when Silas had threatened them on the cellar stairs. Because, Randor whispered softly, you touched my family. Randor pulled the trigger. 2 weeks later, the morning sun filtered through the pristine, arched glass of the conservatory, illuminating the vibrant, newly bloomed orchids. The estate had been remarkably and quickly restored. The blood was scrubbed from the marble, the bullet holes plastered over, and the shattered chandelier replaced. Money could erase the physical scars of war, but Randor Russo knew it could never erase the memories. He sat in a high-backed wicker chair, heavily bandaged beneath his dark grey Henley, a silver-handled cane resting against his leg. He was quietly reviewing shipping manifests when he heard the soft, familiar footsteps on the flagstone path. Lindsay walked in. She looked breathtaking. She wore a simple, elegant emerald dress that brought out the startling vibrance of her eyes. Her ash-blonde hair fell in soft waves over her shoulders. The bruised, terrified woman he had found in a condemned tenement was gone, replaced by someone radiant, grounded, and incredibly strong. Randor's heart seized in his chest. He picked up a thick manila envelope from the wrought-iron table beside him and held it out. "What is this?" Lindsay asked, stepping close but not taking it. She looked from the envelope to his face, her brow furrowing. "New passports. Flawless, deep-cover identities for both of you," Randor said, strictly forcing himself not to meet her eyes. Looking at her would break his resolve. A bank account in Geneva with $15 million. Lucchese's skimmed money, completely untraceable. There is a private Gulf Stream fueled and waiting on the tarmac at TF Green. It will take you and Lily anywhere in the world. Paris, Tokyo, a quiet island in the Mediterranean. Lindsay stared at the envelope. The silence stretched between them, thick, heavy, and suffocating. "I don't understand," she whispered. "You are completely free, Lindsay," Randor continued, his voice tight, betraying the immense pain the words cost him. "Lucchese is dead. His faction is absorbed. The cartel is satisfied. No one is looking for you. You don't have to live in a bunker. You don't have to listen to gunfire in the night or wash blood out of your clothes. You can give Lily a normal life." Lindsay looked at the ruthless, scarred man sitting before her. This was his final act of protection. He was an underworld king who believed his soul was too dark, his life too violent, to ever truly be worthy of them. He was breaking his own heart to set her free. Slowly, Lindsay reached out. Her fingers brushed against his rough knuckles as she took the envelope from his hand. Randor's jaw clenched so hard, a muscle ticked in his cheek. He finally looked up at her, preparing to say goodbye to the only light he had ever known. Instead of turning away, Lindsay walked purposefully over to the small, decorative stone fire pit in the center of the conservatory, where a small fire was burning off the morning chill. Without a second's hesitation, she dropped the envelope directly onto the burning coals. The paper curled, instantly catching fire, consuming the passports and the $15 million account details in a burst of orange flame. Randor stood up, wincing sharply as his injured side pulled. "Lindsay, what the hell are you doing?" "I am done running, Randor," Lindsay said, turning back to him. Her green eyes were blazing with a fierce, unwavering certainty that pinned him in place. She crossed the room, stepping directly into his personal space, bringing with her the scent of vanilla and rain. She wrapped her arms carefully but firmly around his neck. "I spent my whole life looking over my shoulder for monsters. Then I met the scariest one of all, and he gave me a home. Lindsay, my life is a war zone," he rasped, his hands hovering over her waist, terrified to taint her, desperate to pull her in. "Then I'll be your armor," she whispered fiercely. "You told me you protect what is yours. Are you going back on your word, Russo?" Randor stared at her, the ice that had encased his soul for 34 years completely and violently shattering. A low, rough sound that was half laugh, half sob escaped his chest. He gave up the fight. He wrapped his massive arms around her waist, pulling her flush against his solid frame, burying his face in her neck, breathing her in like a drowning man finding air. Never, he swore against her skin. God, never. He captured her lips in a searing, desperate kiss, sealing the vow. It was a kiss that promised violence to anyone who threatened her, and absolute devotion for the rest of his days. Just then, the heavy glass doors to the conservatory burst open. Lily, wearing her bright yellow raincoat, despite the perfect sunny weather outside, ran in, carrying her one-eyed bear. "Mr. Randor," Lily beamed, oblivious to the heavy romantic tension. She ran over and hugged his leg, looking up at him with wide, trusting eyes. "Martha says we can go feed the ducks at the pond. He has bread. Can we go? Please, Papa." Randor froze. Lindsay pulled back slightly, looking up at him, a radiant, triumphant smile breaking across her face. The most feared mafia boss on the East Coast looked down at the little girl who had walked up to him in a dark alley and dismantled his entire empire with a single question. His heart was irrevocably captured. He wasn't just a king of the underworld anymore. He was a father. Randor gently reached down and rested his large, scarred hand affectionately on Lily's dark hair. "Yes, little one," Randor said softly, the coldness in his eyes replaced by a warm, protective fire. "We can go feed the ducks." In the end, the blood washed away with the tide, leaving behind a foundation built not on fear, but on an unexpected, fierce devotion. Randor Russo, the architect of the East Coast underworld, found his most enduring legacy not in the ledgers he controlled or the territories he conquered, but in the fierce green eyes of a woman who refused to break, and the tiny unwavering hand of a little girl in a yellow raincoat. Lindsay Hayes stopped running, trading a life of fear for a kingdom of shadow, ruling seamlessly beside the man they called the Ghost. It is a whispered legend on the streets of Providence today, a testament to the fact that sometimes the most dangerous monsters are the only ones capable of keeping the wolves at bay. Lily asked for someone to buy her. Instead, she bought a king's soul and built a family.